Hi, I'm back with yet another comparison between those recorders. It's been about a year since I purchased the Tascam Portacapture X8, and it's been almost a month since I purchased the Zoom H6Studio. In this video, I'm going to tell you a few things from a perspective of user experience. But if anyone is interested in my previous comparison between those units, check out the link in description or click the top right corner. Alright, so first thing I want to talk about is how tight the XLR inputs are on the Zoom H6Studio. This is how I usually record with my guitar pedals, but look at this. I really need to strain myself to insert the patch cables. I mean, I don't know if you can tell how tight it is from this video, but in contrast, here's a footage I'm doing the same thing with my X8. As you can see, I can just put the cables into XLR inputs without any efforts. Plus, it is really easy to pull out the cables. However, on the H6Studio, with everything I've got twisting, pulling, almost nothing seems to work. And I even hit my camera by doing so. And by the way, there's a lever to release the cables or whatever is connected to the XLR inputs. But unfortunately, it is designed to release XLR inputs and not line inputs, so it's not gonna help. And in addition to that, the H6Studio's XLR inputs are spread to both sides. But on the X8, XLR inputs are put on one side. So every time I try to connect the patch cables, the X8 is much easier to deal with. And by the way, it's not only about line inputs, but the same goes for the XLR Canon inputs. Once you insert the cable, once again, you have to really try hard to pull out the cable. Although it's not as tight as line inputs, it's still difficult for fully grown men to pull out the cable, and you could possibly damage or break equipment around you if you are not careful enough by just pulling out the cables from the H6Studio. Alright, second thing I want to mention is the 3.0mm or 1/8 inch mini jack input. I personally don't use lab or lapel mic or whatever it is called, but instead I use the Electro Uzi by LOM Audio, and it requires plug-in power to use it, and both recorders can provide plug-in power. The huge difference here is that the H6Studio's mini jack input is stereo, but X8's mini jack is mono. So what it means for me is that since the Electro Uzi comes with a stereo plug, I can insert the plug to the H6Studio without any extra splitter cable. However, on the X8, I need to use a Y splitter cable. It's not probably a big deal for anyone, but at least it's good to know before you buy one of these recorders. This time I want to talk about the limitation of file size. For example, in the H6Studio's manual, it is said that if the size exceeds 2 GB, there will be a new recorded file created. And this is what it looks like. It was recorded in 192 kHz 32-bit float. And as you can see, in 192 kHz and 32-bit float, the Zoom H6Studio can record up to about 23 minutes per recording session. Also, here is an example of X8 recorded in 32-bit float, 192 kHz. The whole recording was about 50 minutes. Although I did not stop recording, but in this case, since the file size exceeded 4 GB, it created another file, and the result was that the X8 can record up to about 45 minutes in 192 kHz 32-bit float. So my whole point of this explanation is the fewer record size limitation there is, the less painful and confusing file management becomes. In my opinion, X8's file structure is very straightforward and easy to navigate even if there is a new recorded data created, because the file names are sequential and every recorded file is in the same folder. But on the other hand, the Zoom H6Studio file structure is a bit confusing to me, because first of all, it creates a folder per recorded session, and when you want to edit those files, you have to open up each folder every time. And I often ask myself, how many folders have I opened? Did I drag and drop this audio file into RX yet? And if you record 2 hours, 3 hours, or maybe whole day, you will have a ton of folders, along with the newly created folders, caused by the file size limitation of 2 GB. I have no doubt it's going to be a mess down the line. And lastly, I want to talk about the X8's input gain feature. Since I purchased this unit, I really haven't paid attention to this button before, but it always had been set to high until recently. According to the manual, it only says to switch to low if sound distorts. I thought it was irrelevant because I always record in 32-bit float mode, and if sound distorted, I thought it was because of the sound pressure level of the mic, but it turned out it was because of this input gain feature set to high. So here's a quick example of me recording train pass-bys with the input gain set to high. This was recorded with the UC Pro, and as you can see, the waveform is clipping. And I always thought it was because the loudness exceeded the maximum sound pressure level of UC Pro. But as soon as I switched the input gain to low, the sound was recorded properly without clipping.
Nice.
So if you have a chance to record very loud sound sources with the X8, always make sure to set the input gain to low and avoid making mistakes like I did in the past. And as far as I know, the H6Studio doesn't have this kind of feature, so it won't distort the sound unless sound source exceed maximum sound pressure level. Alright, that's a wrap for this comparison video part 2. I hope it was somewhat helpful for field recording community, especially for the beginners. Bye and take care.